honestly, over the past couple records, we've hit a lot of different themes, and it's always been a collective effort in terms of conversation and just how we're processing through a lot of different things that I don't know how our records would exist the way they do without our friendship.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio, and Aisha Woods, Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and musician. Together, they talk with artists and industry insiders to discover our connection between music and faith. You can connect with us on Facebook or Twitter at Between Grooves. Now, here's James and Aisha.
Well, Aisha, how have you been enjoying this road trip?
Man, it's wonderful. And it's like it's the perfect time. It just feels like it's the season for it, you know?
I think, and we've done this in the past, I think it's a must have for Between the Grooves every year. I really enjoy these conversations because, first of all, it's face to face. And secondly, I love that ambiance, the sound in the background, like people watching, maybe just walking by, conversations happening in the background that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. But these are all, this is raw, real time conversations that are happening. And I just enjoy that. I really, really do. So, I mean, this is the thing I love doing every year. And I hope we continue doing it.
Did you hear anyone asking where the catering tent was?
Did I have anybody ask me, like artists or spectators?
Did you hear any of the artists asking where the catering tent?
No, because first of all, artists, that's one of the most important things artists should already know. But in the case of Kingdom Bound, just outside of Buffalo, the catering tent is actually backstage. So when the artists pull in, they're already pulling in. They have a special entrance. They pull in, and they're already backstage. So the catering tent is right there. Mind you, the conversations that I've had with a lot of the artists were nowhere near the catering tent. The radio station had a tent on the grounds. And that's where a lot of the conversations, in fact, they happened outside. They have a worship tent, and a lot of them happened outside of the worship tent. So any of the music that you might hear in the background is actually coming from the worship tent. Now, the conversation for today was with a group called Citizens, and that actually happened very close to catering. That's one of the ones that didn't happen at the radio station tent by the worship area. This was by the main stage, and they had just come off stage and chatted with, now it's Zach is the main guy. He's the front man for the group, but the rest of the guys were there. We actually sat around a picnic table of all places, and it was the only spot that we could get. I was looking for hydros so I could plug in the laptop and all the gear and stuff, and I couldn't get a line long enough to where we wanted to go. There was actually a little waterfall in the background, so you can actually hear this waterfall happening.
Nice.
So scenically, it was beautiful. It's just a little weird because you don't hear as much people walking around as much as this water happening in the background. But this was a conversation that was interesting because as soon as they showed up, it's like, well, I don't have enough mics to talk to all at once. So I said, who's the main guy I'm going to be speaking with? And that was Zach. So the rest of the guys in the band are going to pipe up once in a while, but you won't hear them very well. But we're going to talk everything about being a band, their style of music, set lists, any of the side projects, because a lot of artists and a lot of groups are getting back into the swing of things as well. And so what's the last few years been like for them? So we'll get into that as well.
Looking forward to it.
Our conversation with Citizens on Between the Grooves. I like the ambiance. I like the outside noise and stuff.
That's great.
That's why I grabbed this gear and stuff too. So tell me about Citizens. Mm-hmm. Obviously not the original name. Right?
It is the original name, actually.
Oh, okay. And then
we were Citizens, then went to Citizens and Saints because of...
That's a cool name, Citizens and Saints.
It was great.
I like that, yeah.
It was temporary, and then we went back to Citizens. And it's a long story, but basically there was someone else in the world that thought we shouldn't be citizens, and we had to become Citizens and Saints for a little bit of time.
Okay.
But now we're still Saints, in the eyes of God, I suppose. But
Right.
but we're back to just being
Sometimes not our
citizens.
wives.
Yeah, no, certainly
Our
not.
wives know better.
No,
Yes, I
I'm no
understand.
saint to her. Yeah.
That's right. So here's something I'd like to get your take on. Christian rock, punk, alternative, dare I say worship, what would you classify Citizens as?
I would say alternative.
Okay.
Rock.
Alternative rock.
Punk. Some people have called us that earlier. Music. I think alternative rock.
I think punk in the days gone by
Yes.
would be considered alternative rock.
Yes, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've been around for a dozen or more years. Actually, sorry, the band has been around for a dozen or more years.
Yeah.
Because you guys are a little older than that. How do you guys get along?
Oh, so good. We got along really well until Dan came in the band.
Right.
Because
Okay.
he's from New Jersey, and New Jersey people, I don't know if anyone's listening that's from New Jersey. You know what I mean?
Our listenership in New Jersey just dropped
Just
off.
dropped.
That's right. You can see the graphs, see the
No.
charts happening here.
Heart
Yeah.
of gold over there. Dan's got a heart of gold. We, I think we pride ourselves on friendship. I mean,
Right.
in fact, that's really a defining piece of our band, and it's what has influenced the songs that we write, is the community of friendship that we have. And honestly, over the past couple records, we've hit a lot of different themes, and it's always been a collective effort in terms of conversation and just how we're processing through a lot of different things that I don't know how our records would exist the way they do without our friendship.
And what about squabbles? Anytime?
Not many. I mean, we have some
Be
every now
honest.
and then.
Be
If
honest.
we have a squabble, it's usually over something that has nothing to do with music.
Yeah, but that's the same with our wives, right? The
Yeah.
squabbles we have, you look
Yeah.
back and think, what the heck were we
Yeah,
fighting
what?
about? Seriously.
We can talk about it, but we've never had anything like crazy. I mean, I can think of one time where we were in New Zealand and we were on like 2 hours of sleep, and we were trying to figure out a set list or something like that. And we had like a little moment where it was like, do you have something to say?
I can understand that, though. 2
Yeah.
hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Like, that's understandable. I don't know I could handle a situation like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So-
but I think we really value each other and trust in each other. So not a whole lot of squabbles. If anything, we laugh a lot and make fun of each other, and that works out okay. I think it works out okay.
that's what I do all the time
Yeah.
to myself.
Yeah.
It's the only time I can take myself seriously.
Yeah,
So can I ask you a business question?
yeah, please.
The more people that you have in a band, the higher the cost
Sure.
to run the band.
Yeah.
So how can the band make a living and provide for families and whatnot, and,
Yeah.
and hopefully put some money away for retirement or something like that? I mean, is there other side projects that kind of
Yeah.
help out a little bit? There's merch and there's
Sure.
meet and greets and all the other stuff that you can do at a concert and stuff to help facilitate that. But can I say, I mean, we all know that the streaming revenue is huge.
Oh,
I mean, it's
just-
that's your retirement
Just
money,
raking
right?
it in.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
pennies upon pennies.
Yeah.
It's
So what do you do? Because
stacked.
the climate has changed in the last 20 years as far as how you
Yeah.
make money. So what do you? Because it's harder for a band.
Yeah,
a
it
single
is.
artist, it's easy. And
Yeah,
even if
you're
they
right.
want to bring a band, they can just pick and choose. Say, hey guys, you want to
True.
come with me this weekend? But an actual band, the more members you have, the harder it is to
Yeah.
sustain that band.
Well, I think the way our band began was pretty unique because we met at our church, and we didn't really have any aspirations of becoming anything bigger than what we were doing on a Sunday morning. But then time went on and cool things came about, and it made sense to travel more. And we've tried some different iterations, and what we basically discovered was we really love our families and we really love each other. And so everybody kind of has a job that they do outside of the band, and that affords us the ability to not necessarily have to travel all the time.
Right.
We've never been out. I mean, I know some bands do this and it works for them. We've never been out like 100 days a year or something like that. I think the most we've ever done is maybe like 75 in a year or something like that. And that's just been a good setup for us in a lot of ways. And I mean, honestly, I think it's a test, I don't know that we would still be able to be a band after all these years if we didn't have that sort of arrangement where there's margin for everyone to do the other things that they need to do to
Right.
provide, because we've seen a lot of bands come and go where, you know, they only get to make 1 or 2 records and then it's over. And we've just made our 6th, and we're definitely making our 7th record. And so that's a huge gift. And we can do that because everybody in the band is really trusting and sacrificial in their own way, that in order to make it be a thing that can actually work.
I had a conversation with an artist, I'm not going to say who, a while back. It was actually on the podcast, but I don't want to name names
Yeah.
or anything like that. I love name dropping because it makes me look good. No,
Yeah,
I'm
of
just
course,
kidding.
right.
So I'm not going to say who it was. And he was in a band. It was his band. And he ended up getting into debt big time without his wife knowing, just to pay the band, just to, you know, provide a living for his bandmates.
Yeah.
Because he felt that obligated to them, to the point where he was in debt, and his wife flipped, of course, when
Yeah.
she found out. And so what do you do? And
Yeah.
so what he ended up doing was, you know what, I'm just going to be a solo artist, and, you know, kept his name, but whenever he does travel, he's either doing the solo gig or he's bringing the band members and then paying them for the one-shot deals.
Yeah.
You know, that's really the only thing you could do. So
Yeah.
if you don't mind me asking, what kind of side projects do you guys have? Like,
Oh,
hang on,
man.
let me think. And I don't know, I'm just guessing. One of you works in a music store.
Oh,
No?
no, but close. Adam works for a record label.
Okay, that's cool.
And then Connor is a mastering engineer, a mastering engineer.
Oh yeah, I've seen that in bands as well,
Yeah.
where because whether it's mastering or doing the back line
Yeah.
in a band or something
Yeah.
like that on the side and
Yeah.
stuff, just on weekends
Yeah.
and when you got time and stuff.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And then Dan, he's a great producer, mixing, just does a lot of great stuff in the music world. So
And you just make sure they all stay busy. So that's good.
I guess, yeah.
That's all you do.
Doing what I can.
I know of a lot of artists, even solo artists, that have side projects,
Yeah.
whether it be real estate
Yeah.
or whatever, and I admire that, because it's nice to rely on the music business to sustain you, but you don't know if you're going to be doing it 20 years from now. It's nice to have a little project on the side. So,
Yeah.
like, why not have these projects on the side, something you
Yeah.
can fall back on, or if there's, God knows, another pandemic where you can't travel and make money that way, because that affected more than just guys like you. It was all the people behind the scenes that
So many.
rely on that industry, right?
Yep, so many.
What did you guys do during the pandemic? Like, what was it? Just relying on those other gigs? If it
Yeah.
didn't relate to concerts, and I guess producing wise, you could do stuff because people were still doing albums and recording in their home studios, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
he was working at the church at the time that we were a part of for a bit, but since then some of us have moved away. But yeah, I mean, like Adam, fortunately, the record label was still able to sustain through that. Connor was working at for a mastering engineer at the time, and I had a lot of other side project music things to do.
Right.
So, I mean, I will say this, and I mean, for anyone out there that wants to do music, in some ways, the music business is not for the faint of heart. Meaning, you have to be willing to sustain the low points and live with an unreasonable amount of hope and faith that tomorrow is going to be better.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, for me, and I'll speak for the other guys, I know I had this moment a few years ago where, you know, it was, you know, you kind of have ups and downs, and it was in a down. And I just realized, like, I don't have a plan B. Like, making music, writing songs, this to me is what I want to do with the rest of my life. When I'm 70, 80 years old, I hope I'm still writing songs. Whether or not people want to listen to them, it doesn't matter. But I hope that I always have a place in this world to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think that's true for all of us in different ways. So you gotta be willing to kind of stay pretty open-minded to what that could look like in order to keep that going.
And if it's your passion, absolutely. So
Cool.
for you guys in music, obviously, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, that's a
right.
good
And
one.
obviously, it's happened for you guys because you've been around for so long, anyways. Right. So I'm a little curious. You guys have been around the block. Can you tell me what it takes to put a set together? Obviously, you write songs, you record songs, but when you go on the road, it's not just, hey, let's just sing a few songs and just
Yeah.
kind of make it up and just put together a set list. I mean, there's a lot involved, whether it's the technical side in the background or the sound engineering, knowing when to put the reverb or echo on
Yep.
at a certain point, or maybe it's where you're physically positioned on the stage at any given time, when you're going to jump, when the drummer knows you're going to jump, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What does it take, and how long does it take, and how long does it last? Because you can only
Yeah.
do the same set for so long, and then we got to switch things up because everybody's seen the show already.
If there's one thing that all the guys have grown to become perhaps maybe comfortably uncomfortable with, is that no set list is ever set in stone.
Right. And that's fine. That's a good philosophy to have anyways.
But we do try and find something that we really like for a while, and but at the same time, I feel like depending on where we are, where we're going, we sort of try and cater it to that, you know. And I don't know. I mean, fortunately, we all have been playing together long enough to where we can make those changes, and sometimes we'll make them on the fly, and sometimes we'll have a set list and we'll try it out, and we'll get to the end and we'll say, oh, this part was great, and then, oh, this part really didn't go well, so let's do it differently this next time. And I mean, I feel like if there's a set list artist out there, just like a master at making set lists, I want to find them.
I think some of the artists you hear about, like especially with tracks and whatnot, they kind of, you know, if their set is intended to be a 20-minute set or a half-hour set,
Yeah.
it's always that set, and they can make it that way because everything's planned out, where they sing the first song, that's the first song that they're going to lead with. They always end with the biggest hit, and then the second biggest hit that was a hit 6 months ago or something.
Yep.
And then in between, who knows what's happening. They might have that quiet time and speaking time and stuff. And that, I guess that's what I'm talking about, where things, it's the consistency of the set.
Yeah.
Like, so when you start a song, even if it was thrown in at the last minute, the rest of the guys know exactly how the song's going to go. They
Yeah.
know where the certain points, the highlights or whatever the song. Do you guys use tracks at all?
We do some, yeah, we
Okay,
do.
I won't tell anybody, don't worry.
No, please, yeah, bleep that part out.
Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, a great example is today we were playing on the worship stage, which is, you know, one that we're playing, and we just could tell, all right, I think this time calls for maybe a hymn or just a different type of song. So
Yeah.
we did that, and we just start playing it, and everybody knows, all right, I think I know where this is going, and we do it. And I mean, I am grateful for that. We have a lot of songs that we can pull from.
Right.
Some of them we maybe should never try and play again because they're too complicated. But overall, I mean, we have a lot to pull from.
I was at a concert, not going to name drop. I'm so
that.
tempted to, but I was at
Yeah.
a concert, and somehow somebody yelled out from the audience that they wanted to hear one of the older songs. And so the artist basically looked back at, I think it was the keyboardist, and said, hey, do we have that song, i.e. track? And they were able to find it in the thing, but the rest of the band didn't know the song because they were fairly new members, and they didn't know some of the older stuff. And so the keyboardist is playing with one hand and giving the signals
Oh
to
my
the
gosh,
guitarist,
the keys.
the
Yeah.
keys to the guitar player and the bass guitar player, and it sounded phenomenal. Like just to have that quality and that
Oh
and
my
that
gosh,
musical
some
ability
people
to do
can
something
do that.
like that.
Yeah,
You know?
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that.
Me, I just look at how amazing that came down because it sounded great.
Yeah.
You know?
I can imagine if we did that, we would try and call the chords out to one another, and it would definitely end in sort of like halfway through, like let's just stop.
We just start laughing.
And we'd laugh,
Yeah.
and then we'd cry, and then we'd laugh again, and we'd live to see another day.
Right. Okay, so here's something I'm interested in. Everybody loves the thought of, hey, I'd love to be in a popular band one day, like big, the high life that, I've made it type thing. And I'm not suggesting anybody ever gets there, but what do your families think of you guys?
Ooh. I will say with my kids, I've never really pushed listening to the band, but they still do.
And you're proud of that fact, of course.
I mean, I am proud in the sense that I hope it inspires them
Right.
to want to, whether they write songs or whatever, just to see that they could make something that they really believe in, and that there's other people in the world that could believe in that too. That to me is really important. But then, there'll be times where when I'm gone, my wife will play certain songs for the kids, and then I'll get back home later and I'll play I'll say, oh yeah, here, here's this song. And they're like, Dad, we already know that song. I'm like, oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
you knew that Citizen song. But I don't know. I try to not make it a thing, just because to me, if anything, they're at the age now where I'm so excited about the music that they're into, and even if I don't necessarily love it all,
Right.
I don't know. I remember as a kid being excited about something, and I mean, if they want to get excited about their dad, sure, but I kind of feel like get excited about something else,
Yeah, my kids are at the age now where, like my daughter's 19, my son is 22, and so they don't come running to the door when I get home from work anymore. They could
Yeah.
care less,
Yeah.
right? And they've got their own musical styles as well. My wife, on the other hand, I mean, she loves like Chris Tomlin songs and worship songs and everything else, which is great, and I do too. Don't get
Yep.
me wrong, but every once in a while she's got that sarcastic little, "Is he one of your buddies too?" No, like
Yeah.
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 It's my job.
Yeah.
It's not my life.
It's not.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
That's a good way of putting that.
Well, it was great meeting you guys. Thank you very much.
Really will.
Appreciate you guys
Thank
coming.
you.
Man, I'm glad that you were able to have a conversation with these guys. And it's so intriguing when you talk to these artists and find out the things that they did to keep food on their tables during the pandemic. And
Yeah,
it was such an awkward time,
Yeah, when the pandemic started, I didn't think it would last as long. And then when it started dragging on and on and on, one of my biggest fears, even in chatting with artists on Between the Grooves, because the show must go on, like the podcast continued throughout the pandemic, and my concern was, and my prediction was that people that didn't have side hustles and other jobs and other projects that we're working on, or at least other interests, something to keep them busy. My fear was they would not be around when the pandemic ended. And I'm sure that has happened. I haven't gone back now to analyze who's not around anymore, because a lot of times you don't really notice. It's years later when you think, oh, whatever happened to this person, or whatever happened to that group,
Exactly.
So that's always been, I've always been intrigued by that, especially over the last year or so. Like, what did they do to survive? What did they do, like you say, to put food on their table and stuff? Because when you think about it, any artist out there, especially as we found with Citizens, it's a group of guys in this band, and it's a lot harder to raise money for a band than it is for a single artist.
Yes, a solo artist. Yeah, sure.
And
Absolutely.
so if they don't have anything on the side for when they're not touring, how can they continue as a band? So it's really important. And hopefully, I think they've figured out the secret themselves, and hopefully other artists out there. I know I had a conversation, or we had a conversation with an artist a few years back, where they were a band and they just couldn't sustain themselves as a band. And so he ended up going solo, and then just hiring the band members as they had gigs or had shows that required a full band. And other than that, it would be an acoustic thing or just him going by himself. And that was the only way to make it work, right? I think that was pre-pandemic, if I remember correctly too. So figuring that out before the pandemic would have been great. So
interesting times.
Yeah, interesting times.
Hopefully we don't have to worry about that whole ordeal again.
I agree. I think we've had enough of that. Citizens on Between the Grooves. And now it is time for some artist advice. We are checking in with Ben Krause.
But it's always better to do something excellent. Like, if it's not going to turn out great, don't do it. Because there's so many times where it looks even worse that you did it poorly than if you did it at all.
Oh, I love that, because there's too often the mentality that, we'll just do it out of obligation or what have you. But can we try and walk in a spirit of excellence? Like, if it's not going to be great, I mean, you think about the Cain and Abel and the gifts that were presented, and God accepted the offering that was better. And it's like, if we can't bring our best to God, and present our best, then, just maybe take a step back and rethink it all.
I understand your perspective, bringing our best, striving for excellence. But the issue I have with that is if you are a perfectionist, you're never going to get there.
That's very true.
So when do you stop? Like from a perfectionist standpoint, when is it just good enough? You know what I mean? And then when you say it's just good enough, maybe it's not as excellent as you would have liked.
As it could be.
Right, exactly. Right. So I guess that's the different perspective I have on it.
Mm-hmm. But, well, if you have more people speaking into it, because the Bible says that there's safety in the multitude of counsel. And so if you've got some wisdom speaking to it, and more than a few people are saying, this is great, let's go with it. Or if you have more than a few people saying, this is not going to cut it, you probably should listen to wisdom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that is it for this week's episode. Next week, we are on the road once again, so we look forward to you joining us.
Thanks for listening to Faith Strong Today's Between the Grooves podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider sharing it with your friends, rating our podcast, or giving us some love on your socials to your amazing friends and followers will only help us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you and share your feedback in an upcoming episode. Send your video or written message to Aisha and James on Facebook and Twitter @Between Grooves, or email us anytime, hello@faithstrongtoday.com.